The rain had stopped just an hour ago, but the street still glistened under the dim streetlights. Maya Rodriguez pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders as she walked through the quiet medical district. Her feet ached terribly after 16 straight hours in the emergency room, and all she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. At 26, Maya had been working as a nurse for 3 years, but nights like this still drained every ounce of energy from her body. The hospital had been crazy busy with back-to-back emergencies, car accidents, and the usual weekend chaos that filled the ER. She had barely had time to grab a sandwich during her entire shift. As she turned into the narrow alley that served as her shortcut home, Maya was already thinking about tomorrow. Another double shift was waiting for her, and her mother's medical bills were piling up again. The diabetes medication costs kept going up, and Maya was already working as many hours as the hospital would allow. The alley was darker than usual. One of the streetlights had burned out, leaving long shadows between the medical buildings. Maya had walked this same path hundreds of times before. It was safe, well lit, and cut 15 minutes off her walk home. But tonight felt different, somehow. She was about halfway through the alley when she almost tripped over something. In the dim light, it looked like someone had dumped old clothes or trash near the wall. Maya pulled out her phone's flashlight to see better, annoyed that people would just throw garbage in the walkway. But as the light hit the pile, Maya's heart stopped. It wasn't trash at all. It was a person, lying motionless on the wet pavement. "Oh, my God," she whispered, immediately dropping to her knees beside the figure. It was a man, probably in his 30s, wearing what had once been an expensive dark suit. Now, it was torn and covered in dirt and blood. His face was badly beaten, with cuts across his cheek and forehead. Blood had dried around his nose and mouth, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Maya's nursing training kicked in instantly. She quickly checked his pulse, weak but steady, and gently tilted his head to make sure his airway was clear. The amount of blood on his clothes told her he had been here for a while, maybe hours. "Sir, can you hear me?" She called softly, but there was no response. His eyes were closed, and he didn't react to her voice at all. Maya's hands were shaking as she dialed 911. She had seen plenty of trauma cases in the ER, but finding someone like this, alone in a dark alley, was completely different. Her mind raced through all the possible injuries he might have sustained. "What's your emergency?" The operator answered. "This is Maya Rodriguez. I'm a registered nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. I found an unconscious man in the alley behind the medical district on 5th Street. He's been severely beaten and needs immediate medical attention. His breathing is shallow, and he has multiple head injuries." "Is he responsive at all, ma'am?" "No, he's completely unconscious. I can see several lacerations on his face and head, and based on how he's lying, I suspect he may have broken ribs as well." Maya continued giving the operator details while she carefully examined the injured man. She noticed his wallet was missing, and his expensive watch was gone too. This had clearly been a robbery that went very wrong. The man's breathing became more labored, and Maya saw fresh blood seeping from a cut on his forehead. Without thinking twice, she took off her own jacket and pressed it against the wound to stop the bleeding. The jacket was new, a small treat she had bought for herself after working extra shifts last month. But that didn't matter now. "The ambulance is about 3 minutes away," the operator informed her. "Stay with him and keep pressure on any bleeding wounds." "I'm a nurse, so I know what to do," Maya replied, never taking her eyes off the injured man. "But please tell them to hurry. His condition could get worse quickly." As she held pressure on the head wound, Maya noticed other details about the victim. His hands were soft, not like someone who did manual labor. His suit, despite being torn and dirty, was clearly expensive and well-tailored. Even his shoes, though scuffed from the attack, looked like they cost more than Maya made in a week. But none of that mattered to her. Rich or poor, this was a human being who needed help, and she was going to do everything she could to keep him alive until the paramedics arrived. The sound of sirens grew louder, and Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been putting pressure on the wound for what felt like forever, though it had probably only been 5 minutes. Her jacket was soaked with blood, but the bleeding had definitely slowed down. "They're almost here," she whispered to the unconscious man, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "You're going to be okay. Just hang on a little longer." As the ambulance pulled into the alley, its bright lights illuminating the scene, Maya suddenly felt the weight of what had just happened. She had found this man by pure chance. If she had worked a normal 8-hour shift, if she had taken a different route home, if she had been just a few minutes earlier or later, he might have died alone in this alley. The paramedics jumped out of the ambulance and rushed over with their equipment. Maya quickly filled them in on everything she had observed about the man's condition and what she had done to help him. "Good work, nurse," the lead paramedic said as they carefully moved the injured man onto a stretcher. "You probably saved his life by stopping that bleeding." As they loaded the stretcher into the ambulance, something unexpected happened. The injured man's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. Despite his obvious pain and confusion, his gaze found Maya's face in the crowd of paramedics and police officers who had arrived. His lips moved slightly, as if he was trying to say something, but no sound came out. Maya leaned closer, hoping to hear what he was attempting to communicate, but his eyes closed again and he slipped back into unconsciousness. "We need to get him to the hospital now," the paramedic announced, closing the ambulance doors. Maya stood in the alley, watching the ambulance disappear into the night with its sirens wailing. Her blood-stained jacket lay on the wet pavement where she had dropped it, and she suddenly realized she was shivering in the cool night air. A police officer approached her with a notepad, ready to take her statement about finding the victim. As Maya answered his questions, she couldn't stop thinking about that moment when the injured man had looked at her. There had been something in his eyes, a recognition or gratitude that she couldn't quite understand. She had no idea that the man she had just saved was about to change her life in ways she could never imagine. All she knew was that she had done what any good nurse would do. She had helped someone who needed her help. As Maya finally walked the rest of the way home, she wondered if she would ever see that man again, or if she would ever know whether he fully recovered from his injuries. Little did she know that this was just the beginning of a story that would transform both of their lives forever. 3 days had passed since that night in the alley, but Maya couldn't stop thinking about the injured man. Every time she walked past the trauma unit during her shifts, she wondered if he had made it through his surgeries. The image of his battered face kept flashing in her mind, especially that brief moment when his eyes had opened and looked directly at her. Maya was restocking supplies in the emergency room when her colleague Lisa rushed over with her phone in hand, eyes wide with excitement. "Maya, you're not going to believe this," Lisa said, practically bouncing on her feet. "Remember that guy you found in the alley? The one who was all beaten up?" "Of course I remember." "Why, what about him?" Maya replied, setting down the box of bandages she was carrying. Lisa held up her phone, showing a news article with a large photo. "Look at this. His name is David Chen, and he's like crazy rich. I'm talking billionaire rich. He owns that huge tech company, Chen Industries. The one with all those fancy office buildings downtown." Maya stared at the photo on the screen. Even with his face cleaned up and wearing a business suit, she recognized those eyes immediately. It was definitely the same man she had found bleeding in the alley. "It says here that he was attacked after leaving a late business meeting," Lisa continued reading. "The police think it was a robbery gone wrong. 3 guys jumped him and took his wallet, watch, everything. But get this. They're saying some mysterious hero saved his life and disappeared before anyone could thank them." Maya felt her cheeks getting warm. She hadn't told anyone at work about finding David, mainly because she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. In her mind, she had just done what any nurse would do. Wow, that's really something," Maya said, trying to sound casual. "I hope he's okay now." According to this article, he's recovering at some fancy private hospital across town. Apparently he's been asking about the person who saved him. The security cameras caught someone helping him, but the footage isn't clear enough to identify who it was. Throughout the rest of her shift, Maya couldn't concentrate properly. Knowing that David was alive and recovering should have made her feel better, but instead, she felt strangely unsettled. She kept thinking about what Lisa had said, that he was looking for the person who helped him. The next morning, Maya was grabbing coffee in the hospital cafeteria before her shift when Dr. Peterson, the head of emergency medicine, approached her table. "Maya, I need to speak with you about something," he said, sitting down across from her. "I got an interesting phone call yesterday from David Chen's medical team. Apparently, Mr. Chen has been quite insistent about finding the nurse who saved his life 3 nights ago." Maya nearly choked on her coffee. What do you mean?" Dr. Peterson smiled knowingly. "Come on, Maya. The location, the timing, your missing jacket that you claimed you lost, it all adds up. Plus, I've worked with you long enough to know you'd never walk away from someone who needed help." Maya sighed, realizing there was no point in denying it anymore. "I just did what anyone would have done. I found him, called 911, and tried to keep him stable until the paramedics arrived. It wasn't anything special." "Mr. Chen seems to think it was very special indeed," Dr. Peterson replied. "He's been transferred to our VIP wing for his final week of recovery, and he specifically requested our hospital because he wanted to thank you personally. He's in room 412 if you'd like to visit him." Maya spent the rest of her shift thinking about whether she should go see David. Part of her was curious about meeting him properly, but another part felt awkward about the whole situation. She didn't save him because he was rich and famous. She didn't even know who he was at the time. She saved him because he was a human being who needed help. Finally, during her lunch break, Maya decided to visit room 412. She knocked gently on the door and heard a voice call out, "Come in." David was sitting up in bed looking much better than the last time she had seen him. The cuts on his face were healing, though he still had bandages covering some of the deeper wounds. His eyes lit up the moment he saw her. "You're her," he said, softly. "You're the angel who saved my life." Maya felt embarrassed by the attention. "I'm just Maya, and I'm definitely not an angel. I'm just a nurse who happened to be walking home that night." "Just a nurse?" David shook his head. "Maya, do you have any idea what you did for me? The doctors said if you hadn't found me when you did, if you hadn't stopped the bleeding from that head wound, I would have died in that alley. Anyone would have done the same thing," Maya replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. David studied her face carefully. "No, not anyone. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know if I was rich or poor, good or bad. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped. You used your own jacket to stop my bleeding and you stayed with me until the ambulance came. That's not something everyone would do." Maya sat down in the chair next to his bed. "How are you feeling now?" "The doctors said you had some pretty serious injuries. 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion, and more stitches than I can count," David replied. "But I'm alive, and that's because of you." He paused, looking out the window. "Can I ask you something, Maya? What made you take that shortcut through the alley that night?" Maya thought about it. "I was exhausted after a really long shift, and I just wanted to get home as quickly as possible. I've taken that route hundreds of times before. I guess it was just luck or maybe fate. I used to think luck and fate were just things people talked about when they couldn't explain something," David said. "But lying in that alley, feeling my life slipping away and then having you appear out of nowhere, it makes you believe in something bigger than coincidence." Over the next hour, they talked about many things. David told Maya about his business, how he had built his company from nothing after growing up in a poor family. Maya shared stories about her work at the hospital, her mother's health problems, and her dreams of maybe becoming a nurse practitioner someday. What surprised Maya most was how normal David seemed. Despite being incredibly wealthy, he didn't act like he was better than everyone else. He asked genuine questions about her life and seemed truly interested in her answers. "Maya, I want to do something to thank you," David said, as visiting hours were coming to an end. "I know you're going to say it's not necessary, but please let me help you somehow. Maybe I could pay for your nurse practitioner program, or help with your mother's medical bills." Maya stood up quickly. "That's very kind, but I can't accept anything like that. I didn't help you because I wanted a reward. I helped you because it was the right thing to do," David smiled, though Maya could see a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "I understand. But Maya, if you ever change your mind, or if you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. I owe you my life." as Maya walked back to her duties. She couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was just the beginning of something much bigger. David Chen wasn't just grateful. There was something deeper in his eyes when he looked at her, something that made her heart beat a little faster. She had saved his life in that dark alley, but Maya was starting to realize that maybe, somehow, he was going to end up saving hers too. Over the next week, something unexpected began to happen. Maya found herself stopping by David's room during her breaks, initially just to check on his recovery as any good nurse would do. But their conversations quickly grew beyond simple medical updates. What started as 5-minute visits turned into hour-long talks about life, dreams, and the things that truly mattered to both of them. Maya discovered that despite his wealth, David was surprisingly down-to-earth and genuinely interested in hearing about her world. "You know what's funny?" David said one afternoon as Maya was adjusting his IV drip. "I've been in hundreds of business meetings with people who call themselves my friends, but I've never had conversations like this with any of them." Maya looked up from her work. "What do you mean?" "I mean real conversations, about real things. Most people either want something from me or they're trying to impress me. But you just talk to me like I'm a regular person." "That's because you are a regular person," Maya replied with a smile. "You just happen to have more money than most regular people." David laughed, but then his expression grew more serious. "Maya, can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone else?" Maya sat down in the chair beside his bed. "Of course." David stared at the ceiling for a moment before speaking. "The night I was attacked, I wasn't just walking home from any business meeting. I was coming from a meeting about a project that's very important to me. I want to build a chain of free medical clinics in poor neighborhoods, places where people can get health care even if they can't afford it." Maya's eyes widened. "That's amazing. Why free clinics?" "Because I grew up poor, Maya. Really poor. My family lived in a tiny apartment, and my parents worked 3 jobs between them just to pay rent. When I was 12, my little sister got sick with pneumonia. It should have been easy to treat, but we couldn't afford to take her to the doctor right away." David's voice caught slightly, and Maya could see the pain in his eyes. "By the time we scraped together enough money for the emergency room, it was too late. She died because we couldn't afford proper health care when she first got sick." Maya felt her heart break for him. "David, I'm so sorry." "That's why I started my company," David continued. "I wanted to make enough money so that no family would ever have to choose between paying rent and getting medical care for their children. The free clinics are my way of making sure that happens." "But why were you getting threats about it?" Maya asked, remembering what she had heard about the attack. David's jaw tightened. "Because some of my business partners think I'm wasting money on charity projects instead of maximizing profits. They've been trying to pressure me to abandon the clinic project. When I refused, the threats started coming." Maya shook her head in disbelief. "So they had you attacked because you want to help people?" "I can't prove it, but yes, I think so. The police are still investigating, but I know it wasn't just a random robbery. Those men were waiting for me specifically." Maya felt anger rising in her chest. "That's horrible. How can people be so cruel?" "Money changes people, Maya. It makes them forget what's really important." David looked directly at her. "But then I met you, and you reminded me that there are still good people in the world. People who help others without expecting anything in return." Maya felt her cheeks getting warm. "I'm not special, David. There are lots of good people out there." "Maybe, but I haven't met many of them in my world." David reached over and gently touched her hand. "Maya, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Why did you become a nurse? I mean, it's hard work, long hours, and from what I understand, the pay isn't great. You could probably do anything you wanted with your intelligence and compassion." Maya thought about the question for a moment. "I became a nurse because I wanted to help people feel better when they're at their worst moments. When someone is sick or scared or in pain, I want to be the person who makes them feel less alone." "And your mother? You mentioned she's sick." Maya's expression grew sadder. "She has diabetes and it's getting worse. The medications are so expensive, and insurance doesn't cover everything. I work as many shifts as I can to help pay for her treatments, but it's still hard sometimes. How many hours do you work a week? David asked. Usually about 60 to 70 hours, sometimes more if they need extra help in the ER. David looked shocked. Maya, that's way too much. You're going to burn yourself out. I don't have much choice, Maya replied. Mom needs her medication and I'm all she has. My dad left when I was 16, right after Mom got diagnosed. He said he couldn't handle being married to a sick woman. I'm sorry. That must have been really hard for both of you. It was, but it also taught me something important. It taught me that when people you love are in trouble, you don't abandon them. You fight for them, no matter what it costs you. David was quiet for a long moment, clearly moved by Maya's story. You know what I admire most about you, Maya? You have every reason to be bitter about life. Your father left, your mother is sick, you're working yourself to death just to pay medical bills. But instead of being angry at the world, you spend your days helping other people. Getting angry wouldn't solve anything, Maya said. And besides, I've seen what real suffering looks like in this hospital. Compared to some of the patients I've cared for, my problems aren't that bad. That's exactly what I mean, David said. You have this incredible ability to see the good in everything, even when things are tough. Over the next few days, their conversations continued to deepen. Maya learned that David had struggled with depression after his sister's death, and had thrown himself into building his business as a way to cope with the guilt and grief. David discovered that Maya had dreams of becoming a nurse practitioner, so she could open her own clinic in her old neighborhood, where healthcare was hard to find. I used to volunteer at free health screenings in my neighborhood, Maya told him one evening. We'd set up in community centers and churches just doing basic stuff like blood pressure checks and diabetes screening. You'd be amazed how many people have serious health problems but don't know it because they can't afford regular checkups. That sounds exactly like what I want to do with the clinic project, David said excitedly. Maya, would you be interested in helping me plan these clinics? I mean, you understand healthcare from the ground level in a way that I never could. Maya hesitated. I don't know anything about running a business or managing big projects like that. But you know what people actually need, David insisted. You know what it's like to worry about paying for medical care. You know what it's like to work in a hospital and see patients who could have been helped if they'd gotten treatment sooner. That knowledge is worth more than any business degree. As Maya walked home that night, she couldn't stop thinking about David's offer. The idea of helping create something that could make a real difference in people's lives was incredibly appealing. But she also couldn't shake the feeling that her relationship with David was becoming something more than just friendship. She had never met anyone who understood her passion for helping others the way David did. And despite their different backgrounds, they seemed to share the same values about what really mattered in life. Maya realized that somewhere between checking his vital signs and listening to his dreams, she had started falling for the man she had saved in that dark alley. The question was, did he feel the same way about her? 2 weeks had passed since David's attack, and he was supposed to be discharged the next morning. Maya had been looking forward to this day, knowing that his recovery meant he was truly going to be okay. But sometimes, just when everything seems to be going well, life throws you a curveball. Maya was finishing up her evening shift when Dr. Peterson rushed up to her with a concerned look on his face. Maya, I need you to check on David Chen immediately. His temperature spiked to 103 degrees about an hour ago, and it's not coming down. We think he might have developed an infection. Maya's heart sank. Post-surgical infections were always serious, but they could be especially dangerous for someone who had already been through as much trauma as David had. She hurried to his room and found him looking worse than he had since the first night she found him in the alley. His face was flushed with fever, and he was shivering despite being covered with blankets. Sweat beaded on his forehead and his breathing was rapid and shallow. Hey there, Maya said softly, immediately checking his IV and monitoring equipment. How are you feeling? David tried to smile, but it was clear he was in significant discomfort. Been better, he whispered, his voice hoarse and weak. Guess I'm not getting out of here tomorrow after all. Don't worry about that right now, Maya replied, adjusting his blankets and checking his temperature again. We're going to take good care of you and get this fever under control. The next few hours were some of the longest Maya had ever experienced. David's fever continued to climb despite the medications, reaching dangerous levels that made her genuinely worried about his condition. She had seen infections like this before, and she knew how quickly they could turn life-threatening. Maya called Dr. Peterson several times throughout the night, updating him on David's condition and discussing treatment options. They increased his antibiotics and started him on additional medications to help bring down the fever, but progress was slow. Around midnight, Maya made the decision to stay past her shift. She couldn't bring herself to leave David when he was so sick, especially knowing that he had no family members with him. His parents had died years ago and he had no siblings left after losing his sister as a child. "Maya, you should go home and get some rest," David said weakly around 2 a.m. "You've been here all day." "I'm exactly where I need to be," Maya replied, cooling his forehead with a damp cloth. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't cause any trouble while you're delirious with fever." Despite feeling terrible, David managed a small laugh. "I don't think I have the energy to cause trouble right now." Maya continued monitoring his vital signs throughout the night, checking his temperature every 30 minutes and adjusting his medication as needed. She talked to him softly when he was awake, trying to keep his spirits up and distract him from how awful he was feeling. Around 3 a.m., Maya noticed that David's breathing had become more labored, and his fever had reached 104 degrees. She was about to call Dr. Peterson again when David's hand suddenly reached out and grabbed hers weakly. "Maya," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I need to tell you something." "Save your energy," Maya said gently. "You can tell me anything you want when you're feeling better." "No," David insisted, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "I need to say this now, while I still can. In case something happens to me." Maya felt her heart start racing. "David, nothing bad is going to happen to you. We're going to get this infection under control." David's eyes were glassy from the fever, but they were focused intently on her face. "Maya, you need to know. That night in the alley when you found me, I wasn't just randomly beaten up. I had given up. I had completely given up on everything." Maya leaned closer to hear him better. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I was ready to quit. The clinic project, the business, everything. The threats had been getting worse, and I was tired of fighting people who only cared about money. I was tired of being alone, tired of feeling like nothing I did really mattered." David paused, breathing heavily from the effort of talking. Maya waited patiently, holding his hand and gently stroking his forehead with the cool cloth. "When those men attacked me," David continued, his voice getting even weaker, "part of me almost didn't fight back. Part of me thought it would be easier to just let it happen." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "David, don't say things like that." "But then I woke up in this hospital," David whispered, "and I saw you. I saw this incredible woman who had risked her own safety to save a complete stranger. Someone who worked herself to exhaustion taking care of other people, even when she had her own problems to worry about." David's voice cracked with emotion as he continued. "Maya, you didn't just save my life in that alley. You saved my soul. You reminded me what it means to be truly good, to help people without expecting anything in return. You showed me that there are still people in this world worth fighting for." The tears were flowing freely down Maya's cheeks now. She had never expected to hear anything like this, especially not from someone she had only known for a few weeks. "For years, I've been empty inside," David went on, his words coming in short bursts between labored breaths. "Just going through the motions, building my business, making money, but not really living. I had forgotten why any of it mattered." He squeezed her hand again, using what little strength he had left. "But watching you these past 2 weeks, seeing how you care for everyone around you, how you never give up even when things are hard, you've given me back my purpose. You've shown me what real love looks like." Maya was crying openly now, unable to hold back her emotions any longer. "Maya," David whispered, his voice so quiet she had to lean right next to his mouth to hear him. "I've fallen in love with you. Not because you saved my life, but because of who you are. Because you're the most genuine, caring, beautiful person I've ever met." Maya felt her heart breaking and healing at the same time. "David, I know. We come from different worlds," David continued weakly. "I know you probably think I'm just grateful, or that this is some kind of hero worship, but it's not. I love your laugh when I tell you silly stories about my business meetings. I love how your eyes light up when you talk about your patients. I love how you see the good in everyone, even in me." David's breathing was becoming more shallow, and Maya could see that talking was exhausting him. "Promise me something, Maya," he whispered. "Promise me that no matter what happens tonight, you'll never stop being the incredible person you are. Promise me you'll keep helping people. Keep fighting for what's right. Keep being the light in the darkness for people like me who have lost their way." Maya leaned down and gently kissed his forehead. "I promise, David. But you're going to be fine, and you're going to keep that promise with me." Just then, David's fever finally began to break. The medications had started working, and his temperature began dropping slowly but steadily. By sunrise, he was breathing easier and sleeping peacefully. As Maya watched him rest, she realized that his whispered words had changed everything between them. He hadn't just confessed his love, he had shared his deepest fears and vulnerabilities with her. And in doing so, he had touched her heart in a way she never thought possible. 6 months later, Maya stood in front of a beautiful new building in the heart of her old neighborhood, holding a shiny set of keys in her hand. The sign above the entrance read, "Community Health Center, serving everyone with care." She could hardly believe this moment was real. After David recovered from his infection, everything had changed between them. His heartfelt confession that night had broken down all the walls Maya had built around her heart. She realized she had fallen in love with him too, not because he was wealthy or because she felt grateful, but because of the man he truly was, underneath it all. Their relationship had grown slowly and naturally over the following months. David had been patient with Maya's concerns about their different backgrounds, proving to her again and again that his feelings were genuine. He never tried to overwhelm her with expensive gifts or fancy dinners. Instead, he showed his love through small, thoughtful gestures that meant the world to her. When Maya's mother needed emergency surgery for complications from her diabetes, David quietly arranged for the best specialists in the city to treat her, refusing to let Maya worry about the cost. When Maya mentioned she was exhausted from working so many hours, David helped her create a budget that would allow her to work fewer shifts without struggling financially. But the most meaningful thing David did was involve Maya in planning the free clinic project. He genuinely wanted her input on everything from the layout of the examination rooms to the types of services they would offer. Maya discovered she had a real talent for healthcare administration and loved being able to combine her nursing knowledge with David's business skills. "Maya, this place is perfect," David said, walking up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Your old neighbors are going to have access to amazing health care right here in their community." Maya leaned back against his chest, still, staring at the building that represented so many of their shared dreams. "I keep thinking about Mrs. Rodriguez from down the street. She's been diabetic for years but never had proper monitoring because she couldn't afford regular doctor visits. Now she'll be able to get everything she needs right here. And what about little Tommy, who's always getting hurt playing soccer? His mom won't have to choose between taking him to the emergency room or paying rent," David added. Maya turned in his arms to face him. "I still can't believe this is really happening. 6 months ago, I was just trying to survive day by day, working double shifts and barely keeping up with Mom's medical bills. And 6 months ago, I was a bitter, lonely man who had lost sight of why any of this mattered," David replied, gently touching her face. "Look at us now." Maya smiled, thinking about how much their lives had changed. David's company had caught the men who attacked him, and it turned out Maya had been right about it not being a random robbery. 3 of David's business rivals had hired them to try to scare him away from the clinic project. Instead of being intimidated, David had used the incident to generate publicity for the importance of healthcare access, turning something terrible into a force for good. "Ready to go inside and see your clinic?" David asked, gesturing toward the building. Our clinic, Maya corrected him. This is something we built together. They walked through the front doors into a bright, welcoming space that felt more like a community center than a traditional medical facility. Maya had insisted on making it feel warm and inviting, not sterile and intimidating like many hospitals. There were comfortable chairs, children's play areas, and even a small cafe where families could relax while waiting for appointments. The medical equipment was state-of-the-art, but Maya had made sure everything was explained in simple terms that patients could understand. Educational posters on the walls were written in both English and Spanish, and the staff had been hired specifically because they understood the needs of the community. Dr. Martinez said she can start seeing patients next week, Maya told David as they walked through the examination rooms. And we have 2 nurse practitioners starting on Monday, plus the pharmacy in the back will be able to provide most common medications at cost. What about the dental services? David asked. Dr. Johnson will be here 3 days a week to start, and if there's enough demand, we can expand to full-time. Maya paused in front of a room that had been set up for children's visits, complete with colorful murals and tiny furniture. David, do you realize what this means for families in this neighborhood? Tell me, David said, though he could see the emotion building in Maya's eyes. It means no more parents lying awake at night wondering if they can afford to take their sick child to the doctor. It means no more elderly people rationing their heart medication because they can't afford to refill their prescriptions. It means no more people dying from things that could have been easily treated if they'd just had access to healthcare. David pulled Maya into a hug as she started to tear up. And it means you get to help all of these people every single day, just like you helped me that night in the alley. Maya wiped her eyes and laughed. You know what the best part is? This is just the first clinic. We're already planning 3 more in different neighborhoods around the city. Actually, I have some news about that, David said, looking excited. The city council approved our proposal yesterday. We're getting a grant to help fund the expansion, and 2 other hospital systems want to partner with us. Maya's eyes widened. Are you serious? That's amazing. But there's something else, David continued, his expression becoming more serious. Maya, running these clinics is going to be a full-time job. More than full-time, actually. I know you love working at the, hospital, but I love this more, Maya finished for him. David, this clinic represents everything I've ever wanted to do as a nurse. Of course I want to run it. David reached into his pocket and pulled out an official-looking document. Then I guess it's time to make this official. Maya Rodriguez, would you accept the position of Director of Community Health Services for the Chen Foundation? Maya stared at the document, which outlined a salary that was more than double what she made at the hospital, plus benefits that would cover all of her mother's medical needs. But more importantly, it gave her the opportunity to create the kind of healthcare system she had always dreamed of. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, absolutely, yes. David spun her around in excitement, both of them laughing with joy. When he set her down, his expression became tender again. Maya, I have one more question for you, he said, dropping down on one knee. Maya's hands flew to her mouth as she realized what was happening. Maya Rodriguez, you saved my life in that alley, but more than that, you saved my heart. You taught me what it means to truly love someone, to build something meaningful together, to make a difference in the world. Will you marry me? Through happy tears, Maya could barely speak. David, yes, of course yes. As David slipped a simple, beautiful ring onto her finger, Maya thought about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with her finding a stranger bleeding in an alley, doing what any nurse would do to help someone in need. She never could have imagined that act of compassion would lead to finding the love of her life, building a healthcare system that would help thousands of people, and discovering a purpose bigger than anything she had ever dreamed possible. You know what I realized? Maya said as they held each other in the middle of their new clinic. What's that? David asked. That night in the alley, I thought I was saving your life, but really we saved each other.